And here we go. We are live. Hey, everybody. So hello and welcome to the CRE News Hour. Finally, the whole cast is back. It's a weekly podcast, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we come to you live to discuss all current events and everything commercial real estate. My name is Henry Eisenstein. I'm here with my co-hosts, as always, Rafael Collazo and Chad Griffiths. What's up, gentlemen? Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Sorry, it's casual day for me today. My family's all sick, so I'm looking after kids and kind of a work from home day. So I'm more casual than I normally would be on a Wednesday.
It's all good.
Man, I hope you
we
guys
look like we just got back from golfing.
That'd be more enjoyable than dealing with a sick family, that's for sure.
I can imagine. Sure. Well, hopefully you feel better here soon, Chad. And Henry was on his escapades. He was over in Norway and he was also in Mexico. So that's pretty fun experience there. I'm sure you're fluent in Spanish now. So next week we'll do
our opposite vacations, going hiking in the Arctic ice caps and laying on a beach with some margaritas.
Well, next week we'll do a full Spanish episode for you guys. So
you'd be leading, my friend. I would just be nodding. That's about all I can do.
Dos cerveza, por favor.
Quiere más cerveza.
Okay, one. That's about all I know.
Say uno más margarita, my friend. That's all I got.
Uno más.
Let's do it. Right, where are we starting off today?
All right. So so I'm sure you guys have been following the news. If not, I'm sure again, it's been in the news for quite some time. So real estate billionaire assembling to bid to buy TikTok. So if you guys haven't been following along, the U.S. government has been applying a lot of pressure to TikTok, primarily related to security and national security issues and privacy reasons, to try to get TikTok to sell their U.S. branch to a U.S.-based firm, essentially. And so I believe there was Congress passed a law to try to force ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, to sell back in April 24th. And so there is a real estate mogul that is looking to potentially become the person who acquires that entity of TikTok. He's together with the Guggenheim Securities and they're looking to potentially, they're estimating the potential value could be up to $100 billion. Now, this could potentially be, I don't know how it's necessarily going to affect them in their real estate acquisition and then really just occupying a space. They've already still been pretty aggressive in expansion. It looks like they had a big push into Nashville. Washington, D.C. is also another area that they've been really active in, Seattle, and obviously New York City. So, obviously with someone in the real estate space potentially taking over at the helm, it could potentially mean that they're going to continue to expand their footprint nationally. And plus, I mean, again, TikTok's the fastest, or was at least, I'm not sure if it still is, but was the fastest growing social platform in the world. So, there could potentially still be a continued growth in that sector. So I thought I'd just kind of share this article with you all. Obviously, TikTok is, the conversation, the story is obviously very timely. So thought I'd get your guys' take on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. I'm intrigued by TikTok, but I have never been on TikTok and I don't have interest in being in TikTok for the sole reason that I just think everybody runs the risk of spreading themselves too thin on social media. And I'm like you guys, I'm active on YouTube. I've probably even more active on Twitter or X lately. So I don't want to spread myself so thin and to be on there. But there's people that are crushing it on TikTok, like Aviva Sonerite. She's got 1 million followers on TikTok and she's like got a pretty loyal audience off of it. So there's definitely a path for it to grow. I think it needs to exit Chinese hands without getting political. There's genuine concerns and fears there, and there's very smart people that have looked into this very extensively, and the conclusions that they all seem to draw is that there's twofold. One, the data that people are giving to the Chinese government essentially as it flows through ByteDance is enormous. They're giving away a lot, but I think that there's also an element where they have the ability to systematically put messages in front of susceptible viewers. This might start getting on the fringe of being a conspiracy theory, but I do believe that if you're China, this could open up a whole can of worms. So I'm just going to throw it out there. You guys can agree or disagree. Maybe it's a Sudafed that I've taken that's influencing this. but I think that if you're China and you want to wage war with the US or the West, you can't do it from a military standpoint because you just get crushed. The US would just crush anybody that tries to attack them. So instead of trying to do it on the front lines, if they wanted to, and just putting yourself in the shoes of somebody within China's government, if you wanted to, and you started systematically wearing down the youth by giving propaganda about how the US is bad and the US is evil, and you start wearing down that social fabric of the US culture and US as a country and what everybody should really be proud of, if you start slowly wearing that down by influencing the messages and the videos that you put in front of them, it might not be a year, it might not be a decade, but the Chinese are notorious for having 500-year plans. So from my standpoint, this is just purely like the Sudafed talking. I think that if they are doing this, that is a pretty good way of fighting a Cold War without actually even having to fire a single weapon. So you look at China, they've banned YouTube, they ban all the social media platforms, yet we have TikTok here. Yeah, Google, like everything. Like they know what they're doing. They're being very deliberate about it. But then when the US goes to move, when there's actual information out there that suggests that there's nefarious things happening and they lose their mind and now they're trying to sue the government to get this ban repealed, like there's something clearly fishy going on. All that to say, I fully support a sale of getting that out of there. We remove that controversy altogether. It's a platform that people like, for better, for worse. But I do think that needs to get out of Chinese hands.
Yeah. So first off, I don't think you're as much of a conspiracy theory as maybe other people would. I think I don't think it's the Sudafed talking. I'm in agreement. I think it's interesting that, you know, if you take a step back and you just look at anything from a China's perspective, like you had just mentioned, if we look at what China's done, okay, to protect their citizens, they don't have a single, I don't know what company, if anything, I would love for answers. What software are they using that has been created and is currently owned by the US that is focused heavily in China? I don't know of one company that they have there, right?
I may have been, I think Facebook may have done some concessions, or, you know, one of the bigger companies, not Google, I don't believe, but it may have been Facebook. I don't remember exactly. Don't quote me on that, but
I was
they
just
had
saying,
to concede quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'm sure they, regardless if there is, right? Because I'm not sure, I'm not going to say that I am aware or not aware, but regardless of what software, if there is any, they would have to jump through so many hoops to make sure they abide by whatever China's, strict guidelines would be for the country, right? In America, for whatever reason, we are just so open with all of this nonsense. When, like, guys, if we take a step back, it's just a freaking social media platform. Like, what the heck is the purpose of, like, why are we fighting so hard to keep it when we have these laundry list of reasons why we should get rid of it, right? And it's like, look, it's just like, hypothetically, you know, any other social media platform that would be owned by another country where, like you had alluded to, like, they literally have full-blown control of what can be viewed or what is viewed to any type of demographic that they choose. I mean, like, things have gotten that smart. So I just don't know why we're fighting so heavily to keep it, right? I don't know what the fight is for that. That just is very interesting to me. I do believe that we should sell it to, you know, and have it be US based if the company even needs to be here at all. I don't know the purpose of it even having to still be in the US. I don't see the benefits of it whatsoever. So, you know, again, I'm open for an argument there of what a benefit would be to even keeping it here. I mean, for just ban it and leave it alone. Like, if this guy wants to go buy it, he can go buy it. But, like, why does it even need to be something?
I mean, it's freedom of speech per se. But to Chad's point, I do think there's a distinct difference between the images and the videos that are presented to people in the US versus what's being presented in China. So, I mean,
that's factual. That's actually a fact.
It is. I mean, and understandably so. I mean, again, so it is. If you have that variability in the way that you're treating people in different countries, I think that showcases potential conflict of interest. And so in order for us to make
100%.
sure that that doesn't exist anymore, having a US based company that obviously has standards that you have to follow that are obviously going to be of benefit to the US is the way to take it. So
But I
I'm
also,
in that mindset.
and I mean, we don't have to rip on this for forever, but I'm saying, like, I believe in freedom of speech, of course. What I don't believe is the manipulation of the source, right?
Mhm.
Where, like, of course you should be able to post whatever you want and have freedom of speech and you can say whatever. But once it's being controlled, the viewership is being controlled, the ideation is being controlled by an entity that does not have America's best intention at heart. I think that's when you start crossing lines of, like, sure, you could say it's freedom of speech, but it is so convoluted and so regulated to our benefit. I don't like, I think that it completely outweighs the opportunity of freedom of speech.
I'd equate it to nobody's stripping freedom of speech. Like, you're still welcome to go on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, say whatever
Post
you
it
want.
anywhere else.
But it's where you have that freedom of speech. And try to go to China, try to go to Russia and say whatever you want in
100%.
Moscow and see how long that gets you with your freedom of speech. So it's the platform.
I love when people say that. I love when people say that, because it's like,
I was in Beijing in 2018, and it was kind of I mean, again, and it was a beautiful, I mean, obviously the history is amazing. The city itself is expansive. I mean, it's pretty impressive to see, but the fact of restrictions on everything, like literally the firewall, you can't access any of the outside sites. I thought it was a joke when people said it, but I tried to do it over there. Doesn't work.
Just last thing, if you literally did the same type of thing where we make fun of the government like we do, like, all these people who make fun of, like, Joe Biden and all this type of stuff in content online, YouTube, all these other platforms. If you tried to do that to the government or the president of Russia or China, you probably wouldn't be seen anymore for whatever reason.
We'd all be missing.
We'd all be
three
missing.
of us would be missing.
You couldn't do that, right? So
this
it's like,
live stream, someone would be coming in each one of our rooms simultaneously and putting bags on our head and dragging us out. That would be live
all of a
right
sudden,
now.
all of a sudden, it would just be like a bunch of this, right? It would just be like, it's like, what's going on here? Just muted in.
So true.
No camera.
All right. So next up is robo forklifts rev up Walmart's warehouses.
Yeah, this one's fascinating.
America.
Yeah, back to America. This one's awesome. It's a company called Fox Robotics that has been working on developing not just electric, because there's definitely been a shift from diesel to propane to electric forklifts, but these are autonomous, driverless forklift technology. They're called the Foxbot. They've now successfully picked 2.8 million pallets without a single safety incident. So Walmart's been working with them for a year and a half, satisfied that the technology is good and safe. So they're deploying it in 4 distribution centers right now. And I think I would have bet 5 years ago even that we would have seen a lot more driverless cars on the road. So I was way too bullish and optimistic on that. But this is a perfect training ground for this autonomous and LiDAR sensor-based technology to really get hold, because you're in a closed system. You don't have weather issues. You don't have pedestrians or bikes or dogs or children that could potentially disrupt how these are getting trained. It's a closed system, and they've successfully launched it. So I think this is going to be a big trend from the standpoint that we'll continue seeing more automation, continue seeing more AI-driven tech. But the problem on it is, how many people want to become a forklift driver right now after you see something like this? How many people are going to want to get trained for that? Because it might take a decade based on how bullish I've been. Maybe it takes longer than I think. But if Walmart's already doing this, it's only a matter of time before other companies do too.
I'm sure Amazon's already doing it.
Well, if you look at Amazon, they have the other robots which, like, go underneath the pallet and then, like, move it. Like, and if you see some of the videos, they have like 10,000 robots all moving exactly the same. It's insanity. It's actually really cool to see. But what's interesting is, like, these types of articles and this type of technology, which is amazing. I mean, that's super cool that they're doing this. I mean, it's just sort of a matter of time. I think that this is also shifting perspectives of, like, hey, if you continue to only focus on work that involves your hands, right? you're going to have a very tough time when it comes to getting a job, right? Being a forklift driver, even a truck driver. Like I was just watching a video how the Tesla, the trucks that the Tesla has that are autonomous that are just freaking flying. It's like if you are reliant on what you can do with your hands versus what you can do with your mind and using like things like sales or tech, creating technologies or several things like that, it's like you're going to have a very difficult time as time goes on because we're moving faster than anyone could possibly imagine in the world of technology. So I think it's just a good opportunity to take like a step back and go like, hey, is the industry that I'm focused on or educating myself in, is that going to be around in 10 or 20 years? Or am I following a path that I'm probably going to be disrupted within the next 3 to 5, right? So
yeah, well, and to your point, I mean, there's definitely areas of different industries that are kind of ripe to be picked as far as automation. I mean, you talk about on the retail side, you're already seeing in a lot of fast casual restaurants where they're automating a lot of the production of the product. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 5 to 10 years you start seeing a lot more of these these fast casual concepts that don't have any employees there. It's literally a production facility that spit out the product pretty quickly. Forklift operators, again, that's a process that can be automated. Truck driving is already on its way on that side. I will say with the trades, if you're ever going to consider getting into the trades, it's probably not a bad idea to do it, especially if you just if you have a business mind and you want to grow a trades business. I can't tell you how strong of a demand that
100%.
Trades have and all across the world. I mean, really all across the region, including Canada, I'm sure, and here in the United States. It's just it's unbelievably hard to find reliable and high quality tradespeople. And if you run a tight operation, I have several friends of mine that run plumbing businesses and electrical businesses, and they're making over 7 figures. So it's it is what it is. Obviously, they built a sizable enterprise, but it's definitely a great industry to try to pursue. So
For sure. For sure. I think the trades are really going to be like the only place to go, right? If you can do plumbing, electrical, HVAC work, I mean, like a lot of those different, like it's kind of hard to disrupt roofing, right? It's hard to like maybe the technology that we'll place on the roof will change, but the installation and all that kind of stuff, I mean, hey, I guess I could be wrong, but all of a sudden they're going to do, have a robot comes in, flaps down the entire roof in 5 seconds. I don't know.
All right. So next up is Henry's article. So 3 types of businesses largely drive retail demand resurgence.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting. You can scroll down just a little bit further, like right there is perfect. This kind of just dives into how like food services is number one, then it goes into discounters, fitness, then food and beverage and healthcare providers are kind of like the top 5 industries right now that are really pushing through for right now. Obviously, this is going off of last year, but kind of interesting to kind of look at. We're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, like 50, 60% of all the leasing right now is in those 5 industries. That's insanity to me. Right. And it looks like what's interesting is that like, so if you're looking at retail centers, like this is the opportunity right now where, like, hey, where is your missing piece? Where can you, if you're looking at, a center, like I'm looking at a retail center that I'm buying, just getting into contract where it's like, hey, I can, you analyze it real quick. It's like, okay, what am I missing of these top 5, maybe top 6, or even 7, we're like, hey, that's still about 60 to 70% of all the leasing right now is between these industries. What am I missing? What can I bring in? And also it gives you the opportunity to look for really simple value add positions, right? Where it's like, hey, I know that, if hypothetically there is no food service, there is no discounter, there is no fitness option or foods or whatever, which one that you want to focus on. It's like, hey, I'm going to look for vacancy in retail centers right now that have X% of vacancy, go in to buy them so that I can plug in these types of retail centers or these types of retail tenants. So, I've been cross-referencing LoopNet a lot recently when I'm doing our skip tracing. I'll cross-reference LoopNet and I look for properties that have been on the market for quite some time with a ton of vacancy. With like 30+% vacancy, and I can go in and try to, talk to the broker about possibly submitting an offer on the property. And this is just a good telltale sign of like what to look for there.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I just got off the call with a national director for HotWorks, which is like a, they have like saunas that you can, that they have silos where you can, cycle and do different exercises under infrared. And they've been growing like a weed. Apparently they're at 640 locations. They want to get to 2,000 locations in the next 5 years. So like they said they were signing 21 leases a month, I think is what they were averaging.
Insane.
It's crazy. Yeah. So just like stuff like that. And that's a health and fitness space. So, and what you're seeing in the retail landscape is that retail, depending on the type of retailer, obviously, but the footprints are shrinking, but again, it's sales. Sales is a function of how much rent you can pay. So the sales are still pretty strong. Like retail sales are still quite high compared to what people thought they would be, considering the money running off from all the stimulus that we received. So these retailers can pay really strong rates per square foot, but their footprint maybe have shrinked slightly. So you're starting to, again, so it creates this opportunity where if you have a multi-tenant center and you have, call it 5,000 feet of space that's vacant, well, maybe chopping up that space into the 1,500 to 2,000 square foot range, where a lot of retailers are looking for that type of product. It almost certainly is potentially an opportunity for you to be able to maximize rates for the center because you can provide them with what they're actually looking for. So just the thought there.
Yeah, I remember 10 years ago when everyone was calling the retail apocalypse and retail is dead, and it is certainly not dead. There's areas where they're probably struggling. There's good retail and there's bad retail, but we didn't add a whole lot of new inventory over the last 10 years either. So it's almost been kind of a self-correcting problem where there's still a healthy demand, especially anything experience-based, right? Like a gym or a chiropractor, physio, haircuts, like anything where you actually have to go to, that's never going to dry up. There might be some slowdown in certain areas, but it's like retail's still doing very well.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. All right. So next up is an article I found. So obviously I've been following along with different technologies that have been coming available just because, again, it's just fascinating to read about. But AI changed everything is the name of this article. How a multifamily analytics company is using artificial intelligence to improve prop tech and data reliability. So this article interviewed a gentleman who's the CEO of a multifamily analytics company called Hello Data. Essentially, they amplify the leasing process for multifamily operators across the country. The premise is that they, I guess, utilize AI to help, provide additional insights to property managers. So they'll scan, obviously it's a web-based AI. So they'll scan all these different websites and try to compile more readily up-to-date information about rents. They'll also give you lease up time information. So like, let's say that you post a listing for a 2-bed, 1-bath apartment, the lead time it takes for them to be able to get the thing leased once it's off their website, that's all categorized in the software. So you could say, oh, it took them 11 days to lease up at this rate. And there's also, I guess, technologies they're playing around with to be able to determine, the type of concessions that landlords offer. So whether that's like, half month free or, again, there's all different forms and functions of amenities that could potentially be offered. And they're utilizing technology to be able to provide that in a uniform platform. And so, again, they're just provided some insights on the actual market itself for that particular product. Apparently he had experience leading a company called Enodo that was acquired by Walker Dunlap in 2019. Then he was their chief product officer to oversee the product for a period of time, and then ultimately branched off last year or a couple of years ago, I guess, and got into starting this company called Hello Data. So more so, obviously this is an interview. They talk a little bit about the product, but I thought it'd be kind of a good discussion to talk about things that maybe you're starting to read about or see, and about potential technologies that could amplify what we're doing on a day-to-day. So I thought I'd just kind of open it up to you all to see what your thoughts are.
It's interesting. I have a friend of mine who owns several thousand units, and he's told me that they integrated an AI chatbot where essentially, like, it does all the marketing, it answers every inquiry immediately. It will schedule appointments. It will ask great questions to vet them and send them applications. It will send, like, ask them questions in regards to what they're looking for and send them all their options that you have available, right? It'll send them the floor plans and the details that already are plugged into the system, right? Like, it does it all automatically to the point where, like, all that happens is that appointments are booked on the calendar, and the person just has to, like, the showing agent just has to show up that day at that time, and that's it. And it's quite impressive, to say the least. When it comes to AI, personally, I have not spent an enormous amount of time in anything more than automations around follow up and CRM-esque types of systems. That's really the main pieces of where I've seen the most benefit personally. But other than that, I mean, a lot of it is really for, you could use it for automations for social media. I've seen a lot of people seeing success there. I have yet, like, they have Air AI now, which you can use for making cold calls, which seems to be getting better and better. Obviously, I use ChatGPT probably the most of any AI platform, period, for asking questions and getting data analytics and things like that. There's a couple other platforms you can use where you can get much good, like, really, really good data. There's actually one I was actually just looking at. I think it's called Gamma AI. I was actually just going to look it up real fast, but I think that there's I have yet to see a platform yet that has really been so mind blowing that I'm like, this is going to change the game in our world. But I think that it's really just making things a little bit simpler for us, right? It's making things a little bit easier for a lot of those delegated tasks. So I don't know if you guys have seen something that maybe has been more game changing than I've experienced, but definitely curious.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. I use it for similar types of applications as you do. What's intriguing specifically on this article that you brought up, Raphael, is the big data side is just so ungodly and complex that most people just wouldn't be able to parse through that and actually encipher any reasonable intelligence. And I think that's where AI can actually really come in and synthesize this and perhaps even analyze it in real time. And like I think you're mentioning, Raphael, like if a big landlord had enough data and they could decipher exactly how much they should be charging, like down to the dollar, and how much free rent they should be offering, and they can collectively use all this data in aggregate and then draw some insight out. It strikes me that we could be entering a time where there's so much more asymmetry of information. And I think this is one of the weaknesses in our industry in general, is that a big company, like a big landlord, like a BlackRock, they have so much more information available as a landlord than a tenant that's coming to lease a 20,000 square foot warehouse. Like, they just have so much more information. They probably have in-house research teams that know that exact specific market down to the fraction, whereas a tenant coming in, they're just like, we just need a space for our warehouse. So there's that asymmetry of information with this big data and AI incorporating it. If a company on the landlord side starts developing this and implementing into their business, we're going to see even more of a spread between the haves and the have-nots. And I think if you're a company and a tenant, you should be a little worried about that spread is going to even grow even more than it is already.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where I think our knowledge base can kind of help, and in some ways. And then, granted, if you're up to going toe to toe with BlackRock, unless you have the resources they have, you can't really compete per se. But you can in a lot of ways. I mean, as long as you have a knowledge of how to use some of these platforms to better serve your clients or better provide insights, that's obviously helpful. I've used it in many ways. There's a guy named Bryant Sheely that I interviewed relatively recently on the Commercial Real Estate 101 podcast, and he's leveraged, his own chat GPT. Like, he created his own GPT and kind of trained it to do a bunch of different functions for him. And from an operations standpoint, he's used it for lease abstracts, which I actually tested out this last week. I'm under contract with a big shopping center here that has like 15 different tenants. And so I tested it out. I, created my own GPT, and apparently there's security measures that have been taken as well. So it's not publicly available to like the broader audience. You can control and toggle between how that data is shared. Granted, it's going to be in your own GPT, but it won't be publicly available, which is a big concern for a lot of people for a long period of time. So I was able to kind of create a lease abstract in a fraction of a time that it would normally take me to do that. So, I mean, if it could save me a couple hours of work, to do something like that, it could be very beneficial. And, there's obviously various different functions that you could potentially, utilize to make your job a lot more streamlined, so you could focus on the most important things, which are servicing your clients and business development. So
You should drop a link to that interview. I'd love to check it out.
yeah, I'll send it to you. Maybe you should have them on. You should have them on the Industrialize podcast. I think it
Yeah,
would be a good
I'll look
idea.
into that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with the topic. So yeah, that'd be a great idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like AI I think has so much, like it has come very, very far, and there's a lot of opportunities for it to be used as almost like a VA at this point, where like it has, I feel like, that same type of capability, where it's kind of in a administrative assistant in some aspects for a lot of different small things, but for the most part, I'm very excited to see where things are in 3 or 5 or 10 years from today in the AI world and how that will affect our industry, right? Very, very interested to see if it'll be anything more than more support like that, or if it'll actually like be able to be anything more drastic in our industry.
Definitely. All right. So next up is Amazon buys nuclear powered data center from Talon.
I put this on Twitter the other day, and it was like one of the most talked about posts I've ever put out. So this is actually a couple months ago, but I just came across it myself. It was news to me. So Amazon bought this data center, and that's the actual one. It's going to be a data center campus. So there'll be a few more buildings, but it's powered by that nuclear power plant in the background. And the staggering part on this is, so this is Amazon Web Services. So this isn't Amazon's data center necessarily themselves. This is everybody, all the small companies that would host on AWS, but it's still a data center. This is a data center, something that hadn't even existed 30 years ago. It is taking up, and this is the mind-blowing fact for me, this data center campus is taking 1/3 of all the power generated by that nuclear power plant. And that plant is the 6th largest nuclear power plant in the US. One data center campus taking up 1/3 of all the nuclear power generated by that. So that stands to reason a few things. You have a new technology that's demanding a considerable amount of power. And I think most people would agree that AI and crypto and just general demands in general for data and cloud storage is accelerating at a pretty healthy pace. It's greatly surpassing our ability to supply it. And that one nuclear plant that just went up vocal, it was the most recent one that the US has added. And to my knowledge, there aren't any in planning or under development in the US. That one was $17 billion over budget, and it took 7 years longer than they anticipated. So it's not even like we're adding a bunch of nuclear power to supply this massively growing demand. So it is a legitimate problem that we are going to run out of the availability of power for how quickly the demand's growing. And I think some people would say, well, we can get solar going, we can get wind going, maybe, but at the same pace that demand is growing, I'm very skeptical. So I think this is just going to be a massive, massive problem in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, just based on the computing power required, and obviously too, like the cooling. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a computer engineer, and I don't know if there's other technologies out there that could, you know, change how the cooling of these systems is occurring, because I'm assuming when you're computing at a high level, I mean, there's a lot of energy that's dissipated from the machine. So obviously you got to find a way to cool the system. And as you have been put more and more demands on the system, not only do you have to provide the energy that's going to generate enough to be able to process all this information, but then you also have the cooling piece, which is going to require some form of energy as well. So
yeah, and that's a great point, because it's usually water, and I mean that doesn't even that's in addition to the electrical problem. Then you have water. You're using potable water in most cases to actually cool these towers, and all of this is taking away scarce resources from other areas that need it. So it's data centers. It's almost being swept under the rug as well. We need it if we want AI, and if you want to have a computer. I mean, we're all talking on a computer. If you want to have all this stuff, it requires data centers and it requires all this. And I agree if we want to have it, but it all has to come from somewhere. And I don't see many solutions being offered other than people thinking that we'll just adapt and things will magically work out as if someone's waving a magic wand and they can solve these problems. But you look at a graph of demand on that trajectory, and you look at how power supply has been not fixed, but it hasn't been growing nearly at the same velocity as demand is. It's a problem. I'm just surprised that nobody's talking about it more.
Well, and I think it may take a quantum leap from a technological standpoint at some point. We may have to make that other leap. Whereas, the semiconductor, for example, was a revolutionary idea. Now AI has been that. Maybe there's another mode that we have to follow that creates a processor that's much more efficient with less energy intake. I mean, who knows? And I'm not the person who's going to solve that, but maybe the person who's listening to this will do that. So
hopefully somebody's working on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I remember. I think we've talked about this once before, but or I forgot who I was talking to about it. But like you had mentioned, Chad, the energy demand and the energy supply. We're actually, because they've even talked about it in several different books. I think even Tony Robbins in his most recent book talks about this specific case where the energy is a huge industry right now that we're definitely coming to a precipice of not being able to meet the demand, right? And we're not adapting fast enough in various different places. Like, people don't even realize that wind and solar, I believe, if I remember the percentages correctly, were only like 2 to 3%, maybe 4% of the total consumption are being utilized through wind and solar currently for the demand, right? And what's interesting though is that, like, we're still using vastly majority of the plants, the power plants that are being used today are from coal and gas powered plants, right? Nuclear is like a far fourth or fifth in most used when it comes to power. The electrical grids, we're already seeing major issues in California, and all they keep doing is trying to push us to more and more electric vehicles. It's like, I think it's got to be something that the people in charge, who, the illustrious people in charge, right, or whoever those people are, probably assumed that this would be an issue 50 years ago, right? And probably still to this day are talking about how this will be an issue 50 years from now, 200 years from now, and they're probably trying to figure out the best course of action. That I'm not saying it's in our benefit, but I'm saying at least in somebody's benefit. They're trying to figure out a way to solve this energy demand. But it's like you said, who knows where this is all going to go, because all we're drastically putting massive amounts of demand in technologically on these data centers, these nuclear plants, these electrical grids. It's like there's going to become a give point that we're going to experience in our lifetimes, and I'm very curious to see what we end up doing about it.
Well, I'll tell you what we're doing now, and it's complete greenwashing by the government. There's over 1,000 coal-fired power plants under development in the world right now. Almost all of them are in China and India. So all we're doing is we're exporting the pollution. Instead of us burning coal to make steam, to generate power, we're just exporting that where we can't see it. So that's where China's
and then getting charged.
Charged. So we're getting taxed, and we're paying more on power generation that isn't solving the problem in any way whatsoever. But we feel good about it because we're closing down coal plants here, whereas another one just pops up in another country that doesn't care whatsoever about the environment. So that's what we're doing. So we have a problem, and the solution is to sweep it under the rug. So I don't know how it gets solved. I mean, Raphael, I think you're right. Hopefully there's some technology that does it, but the problem isn't being fixed or addressed at all right now. It's just we try to ignore it. If we don't see it, if we don't see that coal plant, then does it really exist?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some way somehow the North America, the North American governments are somehow funding a large percentage of some of this. I guarantee it,
Mm-hmm.
some way
Yeah.
somehow. But we're not the ones doing it; it's them. We're very green.
Mm-hmm. Well, to share a quote, necessity is the mother of invention. So hopefully, the more we need something, someone's going to try to come up with something to help us solve the problem.
That would
And if
be
you're
great.
listening to this podcast and you're out there, keep up the good work.
We
my
need
friends.
you. That's great.
Yeah.
Godspeed.
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 All right. So next up is net lease sales market hits speed bump.
Yeah, so at the ICSC, which I was not at in Las Vegas, I'll try to make it next year. I was obviously in a nice warm place in the meantime. I think that this is just one of those kind of reminders that not every single class specifically, not every single asset class is going to have constant and forever growth, right? Like this is just another one of those articles that you read, similar to like we were just talking about office, like freaking right, during COVID, where COVID was getting hurt, and now triple net leases are getting hit very, tough. It's very tough right now in the triple net lease world because this is a piece of the business that is so interconnected, like one of the most interconnected to cap rate, to interest rates of almost. I mean, of course, everything else is every part of commercial real estate aside interest. Period, end of story. But I'm saying like triple net leases is literally like making these thin margins over the very the long periods of time that are so interconnected to interest rates, where even the smallest little inches in interest rates affect it, right? And I think that this is one of those things, which is why I believe it's smart to be a dynamic broker who focuses on several different asset classes, right? Like if you're just focused on one, if your one asset class that you're focused on is really being hit hard, you're going to have trouble. Right. And triple net leases triple net lease sales are experiencing a drastic dip in volume, which by the way, every single asset class is being hit, right? Like in some way, shape, and form. So this is not just triple net leases, but this is obviously just to kind of talk about how triple net lease investment volume fell 26% from to 7.4 billion year over year. And obviously, while interest rates are this high, when a lot of the triple net lease, at least that I've experienced, when interest rates are very low, these are hot. These are fantastic fantastic 1031 exchange options for people, right? When they're looking to retire, they take all their, whatever buildings they built up, invested in whatever, sell them, flip it into a triple net lease, and then, let it right off into the sunset. But this here is obviously going to see some heavy issues over the next couple of years. Obviously, we'll see where interest rates go.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue is that a lot of this build up to on the triple net investment market, a lot of it is developers that have relationships with these users, and then they'll build these buildings, sign them to long-term lease, and then flip it on the secondary market essentially. And where construction costs are at, they've had to put in quite a bit of money to, build the site, acquire the land, do what they need to do to get the tenants stabilized. And so they have to recoup that money, but in order to do that, they have to target a certain cap rate range. And where if interest rates are higher than cap rates, that creates a lot of pressure on pricing. And so we're at a standstill or a stalemate between the sellers who are like, I can't sell, or maybe they could potentially, but it could potentially be at a loss. And so that's where you're seeing a lot of issues, is that we're still kind of in that limbo state where maybe you haven't seen, these sellers being as desperate as they probably need to be in order to get the product moved. And the buyers are kind of like, well, if there's alternative investments out there that I could potentially achieve a return at, and I don't have to, have a negative cash flowing asset if I don't put up 50% down in order to acquire it, then, that's kind of where we're seeing the stagnation. So, but I don't know if you have any comments, Chad.
Just a comment on Henry's point about generalizing, and we've had this debate, and maybe debate's even too strong of a word because I don't even think it is a debate. I think whatever works for the individual is what works. So if someone wants to be a generalist, great. If someone wants to be a specialist, that's fine too. I guess I would look from an analogy standpoint. I'd kind of look at it as, two cars going down the road, they're going in the same direction. One car is a specialist, which that's me. I'm the industrial side. When things are good, you're going really fast. Like the things are working really well in your favor. When the market hits, your car breaks down. Whereas if you're the generalist and you're driving, maybe you're not going quite as fast because you're doing a whole bunch of things and you're trying to keep track of a whole bunch of data. But if the market shifts and you just move over to one thing, your car is probably going a lot more steady towards your end goal of whatever you're trying to achieve in this business. But I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way. I've specialized in industrial my entire career, and there's times where it would have been great to do some multifamily deals because that was a super hot market for a long time. I just, yeah, no right or wrong in my mind. Like I applaud you for doing it. I know how successful you are in it, and I know that works for you. And again, there's times where I probably would have liked to have done it as well. But yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's whatever the person wants, whatever makes them happy. I mean, you can make a lot of money in this business by just working hard, but you also need to enjoy it. So find a combination of how to make money and how to like what you do.
Yeah, I just think that it's like one of those things where, for more specifically when I talk about becoming a dynamic agent, I also think that it's just opening up the mindset of for agents that are coming into the industry, brand new, right, within the last year, right? And it's like you have all these options because you can absolutely specialize. And I think it's, again, to an extent, of course, I believe in specialization. I think there's a massive power in expertise. I think that's important. What I think is interesting, though, is like when you're a brand new agent and you're like, hey, I want to do office leasing right now. I just don't understand why you plan on doing that, right? Like I struggle to understand why you'd want to focus on office markets or join a brokerage that focuses on office, or in this case now triple net leases as an example, right? It's like, I think it's like, hey, right now there's a lot of different industries that are, or asset classes. I keep saying industries, a lot of different asset classes that are absolutely crushing it. Right. And especially specifically, you could say market specific, but like things like as in, if you're just getting into this industry right now, I probably wouldn't do office. Right. But maybe hospitality in your local market is absolutely knocking it out of the park. Right. Like this hospitality is doing very, very well recently. Maybe you should focus on that. Right. But it's like it's coming into this with like a no judgment, no specific, emotion to it, and just looking at data and just say, hey, the data shows that these asset classes are knocking it out of the park in my hyper local market. I should probably start doing that. Right.
Yep.
Especially if you're just starting now.
And you're looking at it from a 5-10 year perspective. Because again, if you're going to specialize in something, you want to make sure you have that runway, because if for whatever reason, you decided to focus on a property type that maybe has a good runway for a period of time, but then, maybe there's a foreseeable future where that's not the case. Again, you could potentially be selling yourself short. So
for sure.
Definitely good advice. All right. So this is an article I found off Globe Street. It is downtown restaurants find remote workers return for happy hours. So it kind of is counterintuitive. You think about it because, obviously there's less and less people wanting to get in the office, but for whatever reason, downtown restaurants and bars still seem to be having an uptick in traffic between the 4 to 6 p.m. time frame, which are the happy hour time slots. In this particular instance, you can see restaurant and bar traffic between 4 and 6 p.m. The happy hour time slot has remained resilient and is slightly above pre-pandemic levels when comparing 2019 to 2023. Obviously, the lunch traffic has dipped off significantly. It's still not recovered pre-pandemic, but I thought I'd kind of share this with you all because it's just kind of fascinating. Like people are like, I'll work from home, but I'm going to get to that happy hour before the end of the day. So anyway,
I mean, hey, if you stopped working at 4 o'clock while you were at the office, you're definitely going to stop at 4 o'clock and when you're working from home. So kudos to them.
Yeah. So I thought I'd kind of open it up, and obviously this kind of goes to show that although the model that a lot of these restaurants and bars have followed in the past with being downtown is obviously having both the lunchtime traffic and also the dinner time traffic from happy hour standpoint to kind of rely on in order to make ends meet. But it seems like now, from a staffing perspective, at least, you probably don't want to have too many people on the lunchtime shift. Maybe you only have one person working or two people working, and then you overload on the happy hour shift because it seems to be the one that is going to result in that you're going to be able to service more people in that timeline because, again, that's when the people are starting to go to those locations. And they also mentioned in this article, weekend traffic is up as well. So weekend and the happy hours tend to be the areas where you're going to have a decent amount of foot traffic. So
Yeah, people still want to socialize and they still want to do things. They just don't want to
Mhm.
drive an hour each way to sit in a cubicle. And look, I totally get that. If it's a pleasant work environment and company goes out of their way to have amenities and make people feel welcome and part of the team and its culture, I totally understand why companies want to bring back their employees. But if you have a crappy work environment and you're sitting in a cubicle doing a job that you can do from your house, why would you want to go back to the office? That's why I think the office is in a lot of pain for the foreseeable future. In Canada, the federal government just wanted to make it a mandate that their federal employees had to go back to the office 3 days a week. They're currently working out of the office 2 days a week and could be at home 3 days a week. And they wanted to change that 3 days in the office. And the employees lost their minds. They're getting their union involved. They're fighting it. They're being vocal about it. That's to go in 3 days a week when you're a federally employed worker. There's just so many people that do not want to go back to the office, but they want to socialize. So I totally get this. This would be right on par with what my expectations would be for the average worker out there.
Did you guys see Elon Musk talking about the remote work? By the way,
No.
No.
He was in an interview and he was talking about how remote workers that the efficiencies are obviously just bar none substantially better when you're in office versus not in the office, right? Like people are
Mhm.
infinitely there is it's interesting how like for a period of time people were, I think that they were showing data that it was relatively close, that the productivity at home was relatively close to the productivity in the office. However, it depends on also the type of position you have, right? Because when you
Mhm.
have such types of positions that are like sales, which obviously for us, it's a nice plus now where it's very common to work from home and work from the office, and you kind of have some flexibility. Like I personally enjoy it, right? However, it's like no matter what it takes, I think the three of us, like many other people possibly watching, are going to do whatever it takes regardless, right? But there's a lot of sales teams, sales organizations, these types of roles that actually do not thrive when everybody's remote, right? Like you can have a lot better culture, you can have a lot better results when everyone's just in the office and someone can make a sale and you high five each other and the energy is cool and everybody hangs out together and you can have that kind of vibe. And it's very hard to do that remotely. So I do believe that it's kind of interesting how because Elon was actually even specifically talking about how it's interesting how people want to work from home, right? The average worker wants to work from home and have that flexibility. But how dare the people who cook our food, the people who deliver it to our house, all these other people that are absolutely required for me to live my life at home, how dare they not have the ability? They can't work from home, right?
Yeah.
Like no, they have to go to work, right? And it was just interesting the dynamic that we have as human beings, where it's like I want my convenience, damn it,
Yeah.
and
Well,
I want it. I don't care.
Even one step further in Tesla, the manufacturing piece, like there's people that have to be in those facilities. You can't replicate that work from home, right? If you're
Mhm.
in the assembly line, obviously there's a lot of machinery involved in the production of a Tesla, but there's also manual functions that need to be performed on site, and those people physically have to be there. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, you can take your time off and work from home and do that." The only thing with
Which I also yeah.
Go ahead. No, no. The other thing
No, I
I
was just
said
gonna.
regarding working from home, the other thing I said regarding working from home is that it just becomes very easy to get distracted. There's some people who can focus intently, and I tend to be the type of person who I feel like I can focus intently when I have a task in front of me. But I've definitely noticed at times where it's like there's something I could be doing real quick just to take care of. You go ahead and go get it done, and that wastes another 10 minutes of time, and you extrapolate that out over a period of time. In particular, when you have kids, I my wife and I obviously don't have kids yet, but we'd love to have kids at some point in the near future. I mean, that's another layer that you have to contend with, because you have family that
Yeah,
demands
your
your
whole family
attention.
could be sick and you're working from home and then you
Yeah,
get sick and you got to watch them. And
yeah, exactly. So
I take everything that Elon Musk says about Office with a grain of salt because when he took over Twitter, he stopped paying rent on his office buildings in San Francisco. So I don't know if that's been caught up. Is he still not paying rent? I haven't followed that story, but he definitely stopped paying rent on his office space. So it's easy for him to say yes, everybody needs to be back at the office when he just stops paying rent. And I'm in full agreement with everything you guys say. There's reasons, and there's always going to be an office market for everything that you guys said, but there also is going to be a section of the employees which didn't exist 5 years ago, that is going to demand that they work from home. And if they aren't able to, whether they're productive or unproductive or less productive, they're just going to go to a company that's going to let them have it. And we're still in an employment shortage. There's still a lot of demand for jobs out there, and these workers still have the upper hand. So unless we go into a deep recession and employees need to work and they have no other choice, they're still in the driver's seat. And if you're an employee that wants to work from home, you'll just find a job that lets you do it.
I was gonna say exactly that. I'm like, I just think it's interesting when people complain about it. I'm like, you're not as the employee, it's like you're not in charge. You can choose to quit if you'd like, right? But like if the company has decided that this is what we want, then guess what? Either you comply or you're fired. Why you they're acting like let's band together and let's fight for us to be able to stay home an extra 1 day a week. It's like, calm the heck down. If you hate it, go get a new job, right? Yeah. Like it's not, I don't know. I never understood why, people have to go so nuts about it.
Yeah. And then that's why I kind of reinforce it. And we've talked about this before. Sales, if you want to work from home, become a top sales professional, because then you can kind of dictate what you want to do. But, so I think that's one of the greatest professions you could possibly get into if you operate at a high level. And obviously, gives you that flexibility. So
100%. Awesome session, gents.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. It's always great to see you guys.
Tom had a bunch of comments too. I don't know if we got to all of his, but I think he was just kind of giving some comments on what we were saying. So thanks for the comments, Tom. If you have questions or something you want us to cover too, let us know. We're always open to talk about literally anything. I don't think there's anything offline until the government breaks in and puts bags over our heads, and then we have to look like this.
Yes, exactly.
Until that happens, though, we'll cover anything.
That's for sure. Yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in. If you guys have any questions or comments, make sure you drop it down below. Make sure you subscribe to the respective channels. We appreciate that as always, and we'll see you guys next week, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care,
fellas.